The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, The State of AI in Accounting and ERP Software, presented by Todd Robinson of Vic AI. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar, and we will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this presentation, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were not able to attend. And finally, we would appreciate your participation in our poll questions throughout the presentation. With that said, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. We invited Vic AI here today because they are industry experts in artificial intelligence for accounting and ERP software. So whether you're here researching a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions you have. And lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channels, where we'll post more of our webinars like this. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Todd.
Great, Courtney. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be joining us from. I'm here to talk to you about the state of AI in accounting and ERP software. My name's Todd Robinson, and I've been with Vic AI for a couple of years now. I'm the head of strategic accounts, and I've been selling and really servicing software technology solutions, specifically into the accounting space for the past 20 years. Prior to that, in the 90s, and not to date myself, I was in the golf course irrigation market and was actually selling hardware and software and doing implementations and programming. So my software knowledge takes me all the way back to the early 90s. But why Vic AI? Well, when I joined Vic AI a few years ago, it was really in regards to the opportunity in front of us and where the technology is taking us. And I do believe that artificial intelligence and machine learning sits at the top of that technology spectrum, and the opportunity happened to kind of land on my plate, and it was too good for me to pass up. Allowed me to continue to stay into the accounting profession, which I have a passion for, being a technologist, and it really is what intrigued me the most. So here I am today presenting to all of you, and thank you again for your time. You have my contact information. I'm sure this presentation is going to be shared out with you, so I'm always happy to be a resource. Feel free to reach out to me as you like. So, quick agenda. I think it's a good idea to first start off by defining just artificial intelligence in general. And then I'd like to share out with you some differences between AI and automation. If I was on camera right now, you'd be seeing me putting parentheses or quotes in around the word automation, because it's really become loosely overutilized term, especially for the past 20 plus years. And I'd like to give you some examples of that. Then we'll talk about the AI opportunity in front of us and what that looks like, especially in this new decade. I also want to share out some myths about AI and what I have learned in the past couple of years, and maybe help put some minds at ease in regards to what this digital transformation looks like. And then more specifically, we'll get into what an AI and machine learning process actually looks like. I'll make it a little bit more specific to Vic AI and what we're doing and what we're solving for, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A from there. All right, so what is artificial intelligence and machine learning? Well, I think the best way to kind of get started is just to give you a Wikipedia definition of it. AI is intelligence demonstrated by machines in contrast to the natural intelligence displayed by humans. You know, we're not quite at a 1-to-1 ratio, right, where the artificial intelligence can replace humans, but we are certainly getting a lot closer to that, and it's certainly exciting times as a result of it. Now, machine learning is the study of computer algorithms that improve automatically through experience. Humans are still involved with a lot of this process, which you'll learn throughout my presentation today. And whenever the human interacts with that artificial intelligence, the machine learning gets applied, and as a result of that, the platform gets smarter for you. And so there's a benefit to that. But first and foremost, there's a tremendous opportunity in front of us. Matter of fact, according to Forbes, they've stated that the #1 technology trend going forward, and that's going to define us in this new decade that we're in, is artificial intelligence. Again, probably the same reason why I decided to join Vic AI, because of the opportunity in front of us. PwC has estimated this to be worth about $15.7 trillion in the course of this new decade. And Accenture's gave a 40% statistic on the labor productivity side by the year 2035. Okay, and so clearly that's the direction things are heading in. If we could give back 40% or greater of your time, especially on the labor side of things that we do on a daily basis, and leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to solve for that, think about bigger and better things that you could go on and do for your personal lives and for your business needs as well. So I want to get into some definitions here and kind of describe some differences of automation. And I can think back all the way back to the turn of the century when I first got into the accounting profession, and the technology vendor that I was working for at that time was Thomson Reuters, and actually Thomson Creative Solutions. So it goes back even further than that. But we used the word automation pretty heavily. And so what does that mean? Well, it was more or less heavily rules-based type of automation. And you could certainly program almost any application out there. And we became programmers, in essence. You would program a rule into that application, more or less kind of an if this then kind of statement, and based on that programming, there would be a certain kind of outcome, and ultimately, that automated the result of that, which was good. I mean, that's served us well over the course of the past 21 plus years, and it has helped to automate us quite a bit, right? Certainly, OCR, optical character recognition, has played a big role into some of that automation. That's where we could leverage some technology to scrape data off of the documents, and then with some rules-based automation applied to that OCR, again, we've been able to automate. More recently, we've been hearing a lot about robotic process automation, and that's trending very well these days. And robotic process automation is very similar to rules-based automation, where you have to program it to solve for a particular process or task, and from start to finish, that for the most part will become automated. What happens with these traditional methods, and even with RPA, is that those rules will break down and they'll need to be reprogrammed. And so there's going to be a constant development or programming need as a result of that. Fast forward to artificial intelligence and where that's what that's done for us and where that's taken us, and the benefit of really becoming truly automated. And I have a lot more slides to share with you, and I'll get into a lot more examples of this artificial intelligence in general, where it will make the most sense. And then apply the machine learning, the side of artificial intelligence, again, where the humans get involved, make some corrections in regards to what the AI had captured and coded for you, and that gets applied. As a result, the artificial intelligence platform gets smarter for you and becomes more automated and efficient as time goes by. We're really kind of even beyond the artificial intelligence and machine learning phase of this technology curve or spectrum, and we've now kind of entered into the autonomous intelligence side. So you're going to start to hear more about this. The autonomous intelligence side is where the AI now does have the ability to make decisions on behalf of the human. Okay, and the Vic AI application is actually already starting to solve for this. We call this autopilot, and you're going to see other AI applications start to solve for this as well. So exciting times, and just some good examples of where we've come and gone with automation from many, many years ago to where we are at currently today. Now, I can't get by without talking about bots. You know, we hear about bots a lot, you know, and then more specifically, what is a bot doing, or, you know, how can a bot help me? And so, you know, it's basically a software application that runs automated tasks over the internet. And, you know, whether you know it or not, we encounter examples of bots on a daily basis. You know, I had to book a hotel the other day, and I called this the hotel direct number, and there was a bot that basically answered the phone, and there were a series of questions that I was being asked. You know, this is common in the banking world or the finance world, you know, or even the medical industry. You know, and so these are just kind of good examples. And obviously, there are bad bots and good bots, and you know, they are serving a purpose. They are certainly helping to automate us a bit more, and just another good example of automation and where this type of technology might fit in. I know the presentation is going to be shared with everybody afterwards. We do have a number of resources that are available to you, and there's a good resource here in regards to the differences between bots, chat bots, and AI if you'd be interested in that. Now, I'd like to just talk briefly about AI in our everyday lives. And, you know, this is nothing really new to us. You know, AI has been portrayed for a number of years now. Again, not to date myself, but I could remember the original Terminator. What I didn't know at that young age is, you know, I just thought it was a robot randomly running around wanting to, you know, kill people, unfortunately, the morbid side of it. What I didn't realize at the time, that it was actually powered by Skynet. Skynet is the artificial intelligence or the brain behind the Terminator. You know, we've got more modern Hollywood portrayal versions of it, like Iron Man. And, you know, Tony Stark obviously, you know, sits inside the Iron Man costume, if you will, but ultimately powered by Jarvis. Jarvis is the AI brains behind Iron Man. And, you know, can anybody tell me what Jarvis stands for? Well, I'll share it with you. Just a rather very intelligent system. I thought that was pretty creative. You know, but the reality beyond the Hollywood portrayal of this is that, you know, we use AI in our everyday lives, whether we know it or not. And I actually happen to subscribe to a number of these examples that you see here. You know, I have an Alexa in my home, and I could certainly interact with Alexa and ask Alexa questions. I could, you know, I could even program Alexa, kind of getting back to some of those early or more traditional automated examples that I shared with you. But anytime Alexa responds, it's calculated, and there's some AI happening there behind the scenes in regards to the response. You know, I also use Waze to get from point A to point B. And Waze is also dependent on other Waze users to be able to predict certain traffic patterns and to be able to route me from point A to point B quicker. So it's helping me to get to my destination a lot quicker versus some traditional map apps that are out there. And so that's a form or an example of artificial intelligence. You know, I cut the cable a few years back, and I stream everything now, from Amazon Prime to Netflix to Hulu, and I subscribe to Spotify for music. Well, there's AI built into those applications, and it starts to remember prior shows that might have interested you that you had watched, prior songs that you might have listened to, and that AI is going to provide suggestions on upcoming shows or movies that might interest you, and songs that you might like, and that sort of thing. And then certainly, you know, you could look at what you know, IBM did on Jeopardy and winning Jeopardy for the first time ever. So, you know, we're using AI in our everyday lives, whether we know it or not. We might as well start to use it in our businesses, and we're certainly seeing this trickle into our businesses across various industries. If you think about the food industry in particular, like robotic AI baristas or bartenders or burger flippers and French fry makers and things like that, there's some brains behind those robots, and helping to improve the food industry. We're also seeing AI used in the auto industry, to Tesla's self-driving autopiloted cars, to food delivery services like Marble and their autonomous food delivery robots. AI is also being used in the medical industry to help predict certain illnesses before they occur, what kind of treatments should be prescribed based on the symptoms, etc. So we're seeing that being leveraged in the medical industry. And finally, like the movie Minority Report, again, the Hollywood portrayal of AI-based police technology is becoming increasingly more essential to law enforcement. Areas like crime prevention and prediction are going through major changes right now, and this is called predictive policing. So not only are we using it in our everyday lives, whether you know it or not, we're certainly seeing it trickle into certain industries now as well. And we're really at this tipping point called the singularity. Artificial intelligence was first coined back in 1950, kind of theoretically, by a professor out of Stanford. And then obviously over the years, again, we've seen the Hollywood portrayal of it to it becoming readily available in our everyday lives. And most recently, especially just within the past couple of years, we've reached this singularity point. It's taken us 71 years to get here, but I really do think that in the course of this new decade and going forward, we're going to start to see more and more AI applications become available to us, and we certainly have to be forthcoming and accepting of it, because this is just where the technology is taking us. I also wanted to just talk about some pandemic trends in regards to that digital transformation in general. Everything's been accelerated because of the pandemic. Why? Well, because historically speaking, in troubling times is when we actually become more innovative, more productive as a result of that. History has told us this. Presentations like this or Zoom, think about how often you'd actually be on a virtual call prior to the pandemic. And now I'm on Zoom calls maybe six hours out of every day. Think about how Zoom has benefited our educational system, and just our students, our children being able to learn virtually because of a technology like Zoom. Certainly AI and machine learning and even cloud-based services. If you're still operating in a desktop environment, that world got turned completely upside down. I mean, you've had to embrace moving to the cloud probably 4 years faster than what you were actually thinking about it. The same for some of these other examples here as well. The other fact of the matter is that, we're seeing a lot of disruption and displacement and across, certain types of job titles because of the pandemic. This is certainly leading us to thinking about the technology that can benefit us here, how it could improve certain types of job titles, and again, help make us more automated and more efficient as a result of that. All right, Courtney, I think we're going to get into our first polling question here.
Yes, we're going to launch our first poll. We would appreciate your participation. So our first question we're asking is, are you planning to implement an artificial intelligence solution at your company? So we have a couple options there, and thank you to those who have already responded.
I actually refer to this as an AI strategy, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in a few more slides.
Okay, and we're going to close out the poll shortly, so if you haven't got your response in yet. And okay, so I'm going to share those results. And it's a kind of across the board. Some people are ready to implement in the next 30 days. And we have a lot of people looking towards next year to get into artificial intelligence, and a few that aren't quite sold on the idea, Todd.
Well, I can totally understand that. Hopefully, with some more slides and more of a presentation here, I'll help put some of those minds at ease. And I think that's a perfect transition into my next slide, where I'm going to talk about some of the myths associated with AI. So, Courtney, am I ready to move forward?
Yes, you are.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so I was not, I'll be honest and transparent, I'm still learning about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I mean, there's so much to know and learn about it. And I was kind of completely new to it when I joined Vic, aside from some of those more traditional automation methods and that sort of thing. So I've learned, and I've heard this a lot, and I thought it would be helpful to share this with everybody. Number one, AI can solve for everything. That's simply not true. But I do recommend that you need to have some kind of AI strategy in mind. What do you need help with the most, right? And AI is not like a light bulb where you could just turn it on and it's readily, on and ready to go and that sort of thing. But you need to think about an AI strategy and what you need help with the most. Then you need to find the right AI solution that can help with that. And the reality is that you might need multiple AI solutions to solve for multiple needs or objectives, right? Number two, AI can go to work for me immediately. AI algorithms can magically make sense of all your messy data. AI is definitely not a load and go kind of application or implementation. And the quality of the data is more important than the algorithms itself. Data is king when it comes to an AI application like ours. And so the most important input for an AI tool is its data. And not just any data. It has to be the right kind of data that's relative to what it is that you are wanting to solve for here. And I'm mainly referring to historical data. Do you need data scientists, machine learning experts, and huge budgets to use AI for your business? No, not necessarily. Many tools are increasingly available to business users and don't require Google-sized kinds of investments. Number four, machine learning means that computers can learn the way humans learn. This is actually referred to neural nets here. So neural nets are powerful, but a long way from achieving the complexity of the human brain or mimicking human capabilities. I mentioned earlier that we're getting closer. And certainly with the autonomous intelligence side, we are starting to achieve some of that. But, again, Hollywood portrayal of Skynet is still fiction for now. And number five, AI will automate everything and put people out of work. Definitely not true. AI will certainly augment what you've always done, but not replace you, right? AI is no different from other technological advances in that it helps humans become more effective and processes more efficient. But it's not going to displace you. It might disrupt you because the AI is going to do what you've always done up front. So you might have to learn to work with it a little bit differently. And that just is going to give you more time back in the day to go on and do bigger and better things, which leads me to my next slide, where I want to talk about new processes. With really anything new, especially with a technology like artificial intelligence, you have to think of new processes and bigger and better ways of doing things. And I love the analogy of the automobile assembly line. And Henry Ford certainly helped pioneer this. But prior to the assembly line, the Ford company was manufacturing cars in a Model Ts in a warehouse, and they could only manufacture so many Model Ts a day, right? So Henry Ford and a few others helped to pioneer the assembly line. And as a result of that, they've been able to, quadruple their amount of production. So that dramatically changed the auto industry. The assembly line in general, really across any industry, helped revolutionize the industrial revolution back in the day. And the same thing goes with really any kind of technology, especially an AI application like ours. You have to start to think about new processes to fully take advantage of implementing AI to begin with. And you just got to keep in mind that we can't continue to keep doing things in a traditional way. And so here's what I mean. I'm going to make this more specific to kind of what Vic AI is solving for. And I'm just going to talk about a traditional human accounts payable process here. And from start to finish, it can take a human. On average, we know this from our clients, our existing users, and from research that we've done, about 10 to 12 minutes per invoice for a human to be involved with that entire process from start to finish. And there's a lot of steps involved. You first have to enter the data off of the document, so which has got to get coded. It's got to get entered into the application. Somebody might have to approve it. Ultimately, it's got to get posted to the general ledger from there. And so this is a lengthy process, and it can take a tremendous amount of time. Now, when we start to factor in the AI component, we've now been able to reduce that down from 10 to 12 minutes to like 30 to 60 seconds of time per invoice. So a tremendous amount of time savings here. Why? Because you're now dependent on the AI up front, probably 80 to 90% of that time, to input and capture all that data for you. We have the ability to wrap in what we call autonomous approval flows, and we could leverage the AI to assist with that. And then ultimately, the human comes in at the tail end of this entire process. Again, you're being repurposed, okay, versus being replaced. You just have to kind of flip that model about 180 degrees and be dependent on the AI up front, right? And so this is what that looks like. Now, if we think about it, just a complete AI process from start to finish with a feature of ours like autopilot. This is at the autonomous intelligence side, where the AI is capable of making predictions on behalf of the human, and we're capturing and coding data at 100% accuracy. We have the ability to, in essence, take the human out of the equation across a certain percentage of what we had traditionally done, and therefore giving you even more time back at the end of the day to go on and do bigger and better things. So a good example of what an accounts payable process looked like, start to finish, with humans doing all that work, to where AI could potentially replace a lot of it. All right, Courtney, that takes us to our second polling question.
Okay, great. And then our next question is, are you currently using artificial intelligence at your company? And we've got a lot of responses coming in.
Some of them might not even know that they are using it in their company, right? So
yeah,
I'm curious what the answers are going to be.
We've still got some coming in, so I'm going to give it a few more seconds, and then we're going to close out this poll. Okay, so let's see those results. So again, it's a little bit across the board. We've got about 31% that say yes, they're currently using it, 54% who are not using it, and about 15% who are, like you said, aren't sure.
I think that's great. So about a third of the audience, and I would agree with that percentage probably holistically in regards to the adoption of AI. And certainly I would have hoped that there was an AI strategy in mind and you found the right solution and implemented it. For the other 2/3, hopefully with what you learned from this presentation, it will become a priority for the new year. All right, very, very good. So again, I want to kind of continue to go down this path of an example of what Vic AI is solving for. And we are a pre-accounting AI processing solution, and we are solving for invoice processing exceptionally well today. Invoice processing shouldn't be a bottleneck or a pain point anymore. However, we have traditionally always entered this data manually. and with that comes errors. Think about it. Smarter finance teams are turning to RPA and AI to solve for this. And think about where some of those errors could come into play here. What would happen if you had accidentally added a zero to the dollar amount of what needed to be paid? Maybe it was only $1,000 and you accidentally coded it as $10,000 and overpaid that vendor by $9,000. That could be a costly mistake, and that's just kind of a good example of what we're trying to eliminate here, and becoming a smarter finance team as an example of that. And traditionally entered data can lead to invoice mismatches and cost your business time and money. And the example I just shared with you is a good example of that. Obviously, the larger the business, the more invoices that you're having to process, and the more people you're having to throw at that to capture all of that data. And certainly, there's going to be mismatches, and it's going to frankly just cost you time and money as a result of that. And certainly an automated invoice workflow or process can help to reduce these types of mismatches or errors that keep occurring, right? Now, we couldn't be an AI provider without having a very large data lake to back that up. Data is now the #1 resource. It's no longer natural resources like oil or gas. And imagine what you can do with all that data. Well, for starters, we're going to save you a tremendous amount of time, as I've already shared with you, based on the accuracy of which that AI can predict the data. And as a result of this, it will get smarter over a longer period of time for you. We're seeing time savings of upwards of 80% or greater, and this really boils down to the accuracy of what the AI can predict, and we're seeing accuracy percentages in the 95 percentile or greater as a result of that. But ultimately, data is king. We have over 500,000 documents and financial statements that is comprised of our data lake that is growing exponentially on a daily basis. And I will share out some other examples or benefits of what we're going to continue to do with all that data in a few more slides here. It's always good to kind of talk about what a Vic AI experience with some human review at the tail end of this actually looks like. Vic AI shifts the workflow from transaction entry to exception handling, and here's how it saves you time. We ultimately have to get that document into the Vic AI platform where our AI engine can go to work for you immediately. The other benefit here is AI never sleeps, right? It doesn't take vacations. As soon as that document hits our platform, which can come automatically from the vendor, maybe the vendor sends it to you and then you forward it to us, or maybe you forward it to your accountant and then your accountant forwards it to us. It doesn't matter, right? We want to get it to us in its most native format, where the AI can go to work for you immediately. There might be some PO matching there that could be required. If our AI can predict the data at a certain level of accuracy, 100% accuracy, we can achieve autopilot. Require no human review at all whatsoever, and then ultimately route that over to somebody to approve, and then ultimately into your ERP or general ledger system from there. We've designed our user interface to be very intuitive and friendly and easy to navigate around. Why? Because, again, we've flipped the model. You're going to be more dependent on the AI to do all this coding for you, but we're going to constantly prove that out in our user interface. We're going to train you on what to specifically look for in regards to what the AI did for you. And you're going to basically come into this system more or less in like a review or an exception handling state, and then approve it, and then again, ultimately route it to the ERP platform of choice from there. And that's what a Vic AI invoice processing solution would look like. Now I'm going to speak about the really the ROI, or the value proposition of this, and I've already kind of shared out some of this, some of these stats with you. But you know, again, what we know on average can take about 10 to 12 minutes worth of processing time. With a human involved, we've been able to reduce that down to under a minute worth of processing time. So you could certainly take that time difference times the total number of invoices that need to get processed on a monthly basis, times the you know, obviously the labor cost of all that, and it could become a pretty compelling use case here to think about an AI strategy specific to your accounts payable invoice processing needs, and what Vic AI can certainly solve for. But again, this doesn't matter. It could be really any sort of AI technology out there in regards to whatever task that you want to solve for, and you're going to certainly see very similar results like this. And you know, we're going to stand behind what it is that we can do and how we can go about helping these businesses. And this is a great testimony of a client of ours, a good use case example of ours, and this company out of Norway called HSB, which is in the real estate industry, and their current invoice volume is around 1.5 million invoices per year. So we're currently processing a little over 100,000 invoices for them per month, to give you an idea of the scalability of our AI platform. We can certainly handle a client of this size, and you know, we've been able to save them a tremendous amount of time and hours. We're seeing a 92% decrease or reduction in the amount of human time involved to code all this data, and we're seeing accuracy levels of 96% or greater. So tremendous ROI and a value proposition for a use case example of this size. And certainly for smaller opportunities or needs, you'd see similar types of statistics here. And again, you know, I'll continue to back this up with what we call some process intelligence insights here around the statistics. Again, based on a good use case or some real customer data here. So this is an example of HSB on the left-hand side of the screen here, and it's common for us to share out some dashboard analytics like this with all of our clients, because we're constantly wanting to prove out what that AI is actually doing for you. Matter of fact, I think any AI provider should put the proof in the pudding in regards to ultimately, you know, is that AI actually going to work for you? And in this case, it certainly is. You know, I think HSB started out around 6 minutes of processing time with a human involved with it. And again, we've been able to reduce that down to well under a minute's worth of time. On the right-hand side of the screen here is the accuracy of what the AI is coding. And again, specific to invoices, at the invoice header level, we're seeing 90% or greater of accuracy. We have the ability to code down to the line item level and at the dimensional accounting level, and again, seeing 90% or greater in accuracy results there as well. So again, constantly just wanting to prove out what our AI is actually doing, and I would think any other AI provider could do the same. So where are we going with all of this data next? Currently, as I shared with you on the previous slide, is our process intelligence insights, and proving out to you the amount of time we could save and the automation you're achieving. We call this process intelligence. Stage 2 comes AI cost strategies, and stage 3 comes the cost insights that we could provide. We have all the financial data, and we want to be able to provide it back to you in real-time, actionable ways. You know, I know Power BI and benchmarking and KPIs has been trending for the last decade. which gives us the ability to look in the rear view mirror, kind of historically speaking, based on all that financial data. But we're really kind of at that tipping point, being able to provide it to you from a front window perspective in real time. Because again, a lot of this data is pre-accounting, pre-general ledger. And if an AI platform like ours is processing it up front, we are going to be able to give that back to you in financial intelligent ways. And we're already starting to provide this for some of our clients, and this is certainly in high demand right now as a result of that. And lastly, Vic AI integrates with all of the major ERP platforms and accounting systems out there. If we don't integrate with it, our newly launched Vic API can certainly solve for that. So, you know, there's a lot of these types of platforms out there. We're certainly having some success in integrating with some of them directly right now, but don't let that delay you from implementing an AI strategy and a solution like ours or any others. And certainly with a true AI application like ours in an open Vic API, you know, we could make sure that gets built for you, and you could leverage the technology best going forward. And so finally, we're sharing out some resources with you. I think they're available in the GoToMeeting handouts, so feel free to download these, the free e-guide here or the free playbook. You're going to have my contact information from earlier, and again, I'm happy to be a resource for you. And so, Courtney, that takes us to our final polling question, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A and wrap up from there.
Thanks, Todd. And yeah, our last polling question is just asking if you'd like to be contacted with some more information about AI for accounting and ERP software. And we appreciate everyone who's responding right now and everyone who's responded to the polls throughout the presentation. And we'll leave this open for just a few more seconds. Okay, and we're going to close out that poll. Okay, Todd, and I think we're going to continue on to the Q&A.
Yeah, sounds good. Perfect. Hopefully the audience has asked some questions, because I'd love to answer some.
Yes, and everyone, just a reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar. And we've had a couple questions come through, and we do have a subject matter expert here, so this is a great opportunity to have your questions answered in real time. So I'm going to get started with our first question. Todd, can you tell us how long it takes to implement an AI solution like yours?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, like one of my earlier slides, you know, is it kind of real time? Is it kind of turn on and go sort of thing? And no, I mean, that's not the case. I mean, we could certainly onboard and implement and get started within about a 2-week period of time. But the reality is I think with any AI application, and what the expectation should be, is it's going to take time to ramp up the outcome. And what I mean by that is, you know, the expectation would be that, you know, you can certainly get out of the gate with certain automation percentages and outcomes, and you'll certainly see that start to ramp up over a longer period of time. So it certainly needs to be kind of a long-term commitment where you can see those types of results. And I would say probably a 3 to 6 month time frame. You'll get very favorable outcomes as a result of that. But again, we've implemented businesses within a 2-week period of time and got them trained to the point where our AI application can start processing that documentation within 2 weeks.
Awesome, thank you. And then our next question is, how do you price your product? Is it per user or per transaction?
Yeah, so again, we are a pre-accounting AI transactional processing solution. So, in specifically to what we're solving for today is invoice processing. So we charge really per transaction, and it's going to be based on whatever your total invoice volume processing needs might be on a monthly basis. Certainly, depending on the opportunity, we could include a certain number of users. We can include the onboarding and the implementation of our application and unlimited support as well. But for the most part, we do. So we charge per transaction. There could be a monthly platform fee, but it all depends on the opportunity in itself.
Got it.
Oh, and Courtney, let me kind of give you an idea or a range there. I mean, again, it all depends on the volume, but I would say, typically it could be $2 per transaction per invoice for a lower volume. But when we start to get into volumes of 10,000 invoices or greater per month, you could be down in like an 80-cent per range per invoice.
Okay. And we've had some other questions come through. So how do you see new ML models, such as with OpenAI's GPT-3, impacting ERP and accounting?
Oh boy. Here's where I would love to have my VP of product development on the call, because there's some acronyms there that I'm not recognizing. I probably should have been transparent in the very beginning to say that I'm on the sales side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat that question one more time, if you don't mind?
Yes, definitely. So how do you see new ML models, such as OpenAI's GPT-3, impacting ERP and accounting? And again, if this is something that we need to reach out directly for, we can definitely follow up with you afterwards for those people in the audience who asked this question.
I'll pass on the latter part of that, but I could certainly talk about just some AI modeling in general. I mean, there's a couple of things that are happening here. First and foremost, it's the historical data. If we have historical data to begin with, that certainly allows us to get out of the gate a lot quicker to achieve higher automation outcomes, right? Then we could certainly factor in some AI mapping and modeling, and that will certainly help with, again, increasing the automation outcome. There's even some memorization on the back end that could be leveraged for more favorable results and that sort of thing. But I'll pass on the latter part, and maybe we could get that answered offline.
Great, thank you. And we'll definitely touch base with you after the webinar ends. So we've had another question, and bear with me, this one is sort of long, so if you need me to repeat anything, let me know. But they're saying that they understand that this works from an AP perspective. They process thousands of invoices that they generally require quality checks. They currently touch 100% of all these invoices for those checks. If they could get AI to kick out the abnormalities, they guess that they would lower the amount that they have to manually check. Is the platform capable of sort of recognizing and kicking out these abnormalities to lower the amount of manual checking they have to do?
Absolutely, and great question. I mean, it's a great example of the process, the human process being flipped 180 degrees and being dependent on the AI up front, right? And so first we got to educate and train around what that AI is specifically doing for you and coding for you, right? Now, from a quality control or an assurance or a review or an exception handling state, that kind of comes in at the tail end of the process now. And one way that we could certainly help accomplish that is through our autonomous approval flows. A good example might be that, and it could be based on really any kind of setting. It could be vendor specific. It could be a trigger based on a certain dollar amount. It could be based on the GL code of where that line item transaction needs to get coded to. There could be one person or multiple people involved with a particular approval flow, and we can certainly put those triggers in place and make it autonomous to implement the quality control or to mimic the quality control needs that you have within your organization. So I would certainly start from there, right? And we can certainly solve for that. That's a very good question.
And then our next question is, will AI eliminate my job?
Kind of goes back to those false misperceptions or the myths that I was talking about earlier. You know, look, I'll be transparent. I think it all depends on the industry. I know for what we are particularly solving for, and we launched our product about 3 years ago, and we're solving for invoice processing today exceptionally well. We're also going to continue to solve for other types of pre-accounting transactions, from bank and credit card statements to invoices and receipts, and being able to match up all that documentation and get it coded for you. And we're certainly going to help augment that, right? And but the reality is, and I think across other industries and applications, yeah, you could run the risk of not necessarily losing your job, but being disrupted. And I think the organization should take that into consideration and repurpose you or the humans in general to go on and do bigger and better things for that organization. The fact of the matter is, especially for what Vic AI solves for, is we shouldn't have to be manually entering data. And specific to what we're solving for, really, again, any other type of task or process, that's a problem. And we should be, leverage the AI to certainly assist us there. And with that just comes some change management. I would certainly love to get back time in my day from having to manually input all that data to, again, go on and do bigger and better things for the organization.
Great. And then our last question is, should I contact you or SWK?
A good question. I'd like to thank SWK for allowing me to present to you today. I would certainly encourage you to reach out to SWK Technologies and your contacts there. Again, I'm always happy to be a resource for you either way.
Great. And I'd like to also say that if you asked a question today and you're just looking for a more in-depth answer, or you didn't have a chance to get your question answered in this session, just go ahead and reach out. And if you have any follow-up questions that come to mind, reach out and we'll provide you with those answers. And Todd is always here to help. And I'd like to thank you so much, Todd, for a great presentation and for taking the time to be with us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone in the audience for attending this webinar. And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.